Hi, thanks for joining me for this 30-minute yoga practice. I'm Andrea. If you don't happen to have a yoga mat like I'm standing on, no worries. Find a place in your house that's not too slippery, maybe a carpeted area, and you'll be just fine. And though I'm barefoot, if you prefer to wear shoes, great, do it. I also have a couple of blocks. You can use sturdy books, some thick books maybe from your house. A chair is great for balance, just in case. We do have a few little balancing things we'll do today. A folded blanket, both to sit on and then sometimes if we do hands and knees things to pad our knees. And then though I have an official bolster, you could use a cushion from your couch. That's also something nice to sit on sometimes for tight hips or just because it's a nice stoop to sit on. Let's start. Facing what would be the long edge of your mat. So again, don't worry if that's not really what you're using. Feet hip distance, and we find our Tadasana, our mountain pose here. Turn your palms away from one another. Put a soft bend in your knees. Let it be playful, so you can feel all 4 points of your feet. Big toe knuckle, pinky toe knuckle, 2 points at the heel, whether you're in shoes or barefoot. And then we want to stand majestic in our mountain. So think ears over shoulders, over hips, over heels. We're stacking those atop one another in our mountain. And we use this posture to stop so that we can start. Appreciate your breath coming in and out. And if you can do that just through your nose, that's ideal. This is where you may want to incorporate your chair. We'll do something called tree pose. So I'm going to bring my chair so that I can use the back of it with my hand, my left hand. As I stand on my left foot, let's set it up slowly. So right hand on your hip, we'll stand on the left foot, which becomes the trunk of our tree, and we can think of it as growing our tree out of our mountain. Hug your outer left hip in. Take your right leg out in front of you. It doesn't have to go high to the sky. What I want you to feel though is, right now all of our toes are facing the ceiling. From your hip, which you can feel under your hand, turn that right leg out. Let's do that another time. So we turn that right leg out, but we don't want to lose our trunk. So keep that outer left hip hugging in. And then we will translate this into either a kickstand of your right toes on the ground, a kickstand a little higher up on your shin, or for some of you, a kickstand where your right foot goes into your inner thigh. This is not a goal to get to. Some bodies do this more easily than others. So find the place that you can celebrate your beautiful body. Let your outer left hip continue to be a solid tree trunk. And then it might be that you take your right thumb to the sky and your arm out to the sky, like we're spreading the branches of our tree. And then it can be playful, fun, to take your left thumb to the sky and then maybe return it to your chair if it's feeling a little wobbly, or with deep roots to our tree, we can widen our branches. Your gaze is right out in front of you, unless it feels quite wobbly, like a windy day in your tree. Maybe looking down at the ground helps ground you. A couple of more moments here. And then return your left hand to your chair, your right hand to your hip. Point your right knee forward and then just step down into your mountain, feet hip distance, palms face away from one another. We stack ears over, shoulders over, hips over heels again. I'm going to move my chair, but you can just move your body. So let me do the moving of equipment and so on so that you can see me most easily. And then we just change sides. So I've got my right hand on the back of my chair. Maybe you're doing the same. Let's tend to our tree trunk. Outer right hip now is solid. Left hand onto your hip. As we stand onto our right foot, we take our left leg out in front, and we're just going to nerd out together for a moment. Turn your toes out, but let that happen at the hip joint, and then turn your toes back up to the sky. How's that outer right hip doing? I know, me too. Turn your left leg out, so you see the toes turn out, and then turn your toes to the sky. And this last time, we'll set it up for our tree pose. Turn your toes out, translate that to a kickstand on the ground, hugging that outer right hip in, so stability in our tree trunk. You can crawl it up the shin, even take it into the inner thigh, it's up to you. And then once we're here in solid, and we've tended one more time to that tree trunk, you can grow your branches, left thumb to the sky, left arm out to the side. Maybe right arm out to the side, thumbs to the sky. If it's wobbly, just think of it as a breezy day in your tree and maybe look down so that you feel more grounded. And of course, you can keep your right hand on the chair the whole time. A couple moments here. Let's go out slowly. So right hand on your chair if it's not, left hand onto your hip. Turn your left knee forward and then step hip distance back into the majesty of our mountain. And we will mindfully tend to our props. So let's set our props up for some poses that are going to happen a little bit later. Take your chair midway down your mat. I need to move my blocks. So here I am speaking of mindfully moving props. And I'm not sure that I'm an example, but let's take our blocks off the side of our mat, so they aren't in our working area, and the same with our chair. It's just halfway down our mat with the chair base available to us if we choose to do that. And then we'll take a wide stance, so thumbs to the sky, like we did in our tree a second ago, but this time we step our legs wide. You can basically angle so that you've got your ankles underneath your wrists. We'll start with that. And then turn your right leg out like we just did, setting up our tree pose, and let your right foot face that short edge of your mat. And then cheat your left heel back at about a 45-degree angle. First, bend your front knee and make sure that we're not forward of the ankle, which I am, so I need a wider stance, and you might find that you need that too. We're going to dance our warrior in a moment, so let's first land our warrior. Arms outstretched with thumbs to the sky. An even amount of work in both legs, even though the front leg kind of steals the show a little bit sometimes that way. Now, reversing our warrior, just take your left hand lightly on your left thigh, and with your right thumb to the sky, we just reach in a V shape. So we get a little bit of a stretch on the right side of the waist, and then we'll come back to our warrior two with the thumbs to the sky and take our right forearm across our right thigh and left thumb up to the sky. It's a little oomph here. So you can feel that there's a karate chop with that forearm across the thigh. Encourage your right thigh bone to the right as opposed to letting your knee collapse over to the left. Come back to our warrior two, thumbs to the sky, and we'll reverse it again. So left hand lightly on your left thigh, right thumb to the sky, and then we come back to warrior two, thumbs to the sky, and forearm across the thigh, left thumb to the sky. We're dancing. Warrior two, right thumb to the sky, left hand lightly down your leg, back to warrior two, and then right forearm across the thigh, and left thumb to the sky. Warrior two, let's do that one more time. Right thumb to the sky, left hand just light as a feather on your left thigh. Back to our warrior two, thumbs to the sky, and then right forearm across the thigh, and left thumb to the sky. Head to warrior two, and we will pause. And then straighten your front leg, and turn all of your toes to face the long edge of your mat so we can set up side two of our dancing warrior. Left foot faces the short edge of your mat that comes from the hip. Back heel at a 45-degree angle, thumbs to the sky, bend your left knee. Just make sure, we should be well spaced because we were just here, but we have a vertical line from our left knee to our left ankle. And then right hand lightly on your thigh, left thumb to the sky like a V shape. Back to our warrior two with our thumbs to the sky, and then left forearm across the thigh, right thumb to the sky. Pause just for a moment here since we did on our first side. Remember, you're karate chopping and encouraging your left thigh to the left. It's not caving in to the right. And then back to warrior two, thumbs to the sky. Right hand lightly on your back thigh, left thumb to the sky. Back to warrior two with our thumbs to the sky. Left forearm across the thigh, right arm in our V shape, back to our warrior two. Right hand light as a feather, left thumb to the sky. Back to our warrior two, we're dancing. Left forearm across the thigh. Warrior two. Right hand light as a feather, left thumb to the sky. Warrior two, we'll do that one more time. Left forearm. Warrior two. Right hand light as a feather, left thumb to the sky. Warrior two, let's stay here for a moment. Thumbs to the sky, left thigh bone, moving to the left, and then straighten your front leg. Turn all toes to face that long edge of your mat. And this is where we will now use the props that we have very mindfully placed for us to use if we want to. I'm going to give you options. This will go into various places where you may or may not want to use certain props. Turn your right leg out. Again, we're in this wide stance. We're pretty well set, I think. But this time, keep your right leg straight, however, with a little buffer of the tiniest bit of bend in your knee. Thumbs to the sky, like we've been up to. Same action is happening in our hip as when we found it to set up our tree pose. Tree pose was like the blueprint for all of these. And then we will hinge at our hip. So this is not a side bend. This is a hip hinge, lifting that left hip. Think slightly sassy. And here are your options. You can take your right hand onto one of your tall blocks and you'll need to move it into the mix right next to your right heel. Or you can take your right hand onto the base of your chair and that gives you a little bit more room, a little bit more space maybe to play with things. Left thumb is to the sky. Spin your inner upper arms away from each other so it feels like we're creating amazing freedom between our shoulders and our ears. 3 moments here in triangle. We build it from the ground up, so our right big toe mound is pressing. That's going to keep that tiny micro bend in our front knee. We won't feel like we're locking things out. Steady breath. Couple more moments here. Such good news for our hips, this whole sequence. Now come upright, thumbs to the sky. Bend your right knee like our dancing warrior suggested. You may want to widen the front and back of your stance like I just did. Right forearm across the thigh, left thumb to the sky. You're always welcome to stay with the forearm across the thigh the whole time. You might venture into right hand on the block that is right there where you were using it for your triangle, or right hand on the seat of your chair that's right there from when we did our triangle. We always want to be careful that we don't lower our head any lower than our hips. So that's kind of a rule of thumb. Can you make your bottom ribs as long as your top ribs? And keep that hinge at your hip as you tuck your right hip underneath you? Know that if you need it, you can come out of it, take a break, and then come back in. All I ask is that you do that mindfully. So it means you don't just collapse out of it. You exit with attention and presence of mind. Last couple of moments here. And then upright into warrior two, thumbs to the sky. We'll pause for 3, and that's a little spicy. And for 2. And then straighten your front leg. Turn all toes to face that long edge of your mat, but before you do, move your block off your mat so that it's not going to be underfoot when we do our second side. All toes face the long edge of our mat. We can just keep this stance. Make sure that your props are behind you and at the ready. Turn your left leg out like we did with our tree pose. Cheat your back heel at that 45-degree angle. Thumbs to the sky. Micro bend in our left knee. We're not side bending, we're hinging. So right hip lifts as we hinge at our left hip, and we reach out long and either find a tall block or the base of our chair. So either one is great. Sorry about my squeaky chair against the ground, but it happens. And then we'll stay with it here and we'll really refine our hip hinge, which is exactly what we did when we turned our leg out and set up our tree pose. Our hips are happy that way because they want to move in what's called an external rotation. That's the action that we're talking about here. And they kind of don't do it that much in our daily life the way that we operate. We tend to be in chairs, walking, so we only really use one articulation at the hip. This is really good news for our happy hips and our hamstrings and our inner thighs, wouldn't you say, here in triangle? Stay for a few moments. And then slowly upright, thumbs to the sky. Bend your front knee. And remember, forearm across your thigh, right thumb to the sky. Brilliant. You can stay with this the whole time. It would be a great place to stay. You might venture your left hand onto your block or onto the base of your chair, and it's there from our triangle. And then we stay. And we breathe. And we meditate. Last few moments, I haven't forgotten you. I'm just giving you some silence in which to meditate, to simply be. Firm through your feet and your belly, upright into Warrior Two, thumbs to the sky. Let's wait just for a moment. I know it's kind of spicy here. Stay for 3 and for 2. And then straighten your front leg. Turn all toes to face that long edge of your mat. And now we're going to heel toe back to our mountain. And let's pause in our mountain because we've been with a wide stance for a long time. We want to balance that out with coming back to center in every way. Find your chair. I think that your chair will probably serve you better than our 2 blocks. However, you're welcome to situate your 2 blocks off of your mat, so off the sides of your mat so it's not right in your working area. I'm going to actually angle myself a little bit so that it's easy for you to see me, and you can angle yourself too. Chair out in front of you. I think that the chair is going to be our friend for this next one. That's just my thoughts on the situation, and since I know what's next, I might have educated thoughts. Hands on your hips. Remember how we set up our tree pose? So you're going to stand on your left leg. Take your right leg out in front of you and with your hands on your hips, and you can use the back of your chair already. Turn the leg out like we did with our tree. But this time, ankle on top of knee. Bend your left knee. Curl these right toes back. And then bring your hands onto the seat of your chair. But remember, head above hips, super important. It might be that some of you like to use your hands on your blocks, and that if this is the case, I want you to be particularly careful that you're not dipping low, and also not only not dipping low, but not getting into a rounded spine. So let's think of the majesty of our mountain in our figure 4. You feel that hip stretch? Yeah, me too. You want to hug that outer left hip in so it reminds you of your tree trunk from the very beginning of the practice. Juicy little stretch and balance moment. Now, it's a little balancing challenge, actually, but take your hands onto your hips, come upright, take your right knee to your chest and stand into your mountain hip distance. Hands to your hips, left leg out in front. Stand on your right leg and get a little oomph into your tree trunk, even though I know it's not technically a tree pose. Turn your left leg out, bend your right knee, and cross left ankle on top of your right thigh, and then just find your way probably to the seat of your chair. It might even be the back of your chair because we're looking for that majesty. Maybe you use your blocks, but I think sometimes we think that the goal is to get our hands to the ground. And what I tend to see and have in all of my many, many years of teaching is that when we struggle to get our hand on the ground, we're collapsing into habits that we're actually trying to steer ourselves away from with the consciousness of our yoga practice. So think majesty of mountain, stretch into our left hip, stability in the right hip, hugging it in. And I'll be quiet so we meditate for just about 30 seconds here. Our exit is that little bit of a balance challenge. You can do it. Hands on your hips, come upright, bring your left knee into your chest, and then stand into your mountain. Pause. We'll use our chair, seat, or maybe our blocks as a way down to the ground, but let's do a half sun salutation to get there. So standing in your mountain, arms out and up, a V shape, and then exhale, hinge at your hips and hands to your thighs. Inhale, lengthen to your spine. Place your hands on the seat of your chair or onto your blocks, and then just mindfully onto our hands and knees. We want to move these props out of the way. You might want your block within reach. You also may want to use that folded blanket that we've spoken of. We're going to do a seated tree pose. So if you fold your blanket and take a seat on your blanket, a lot of times what that does, or it could be the cushion, so that can be helpful too. We want to get away from the roundedness. We spoke of it in our standing poses, and find the majesty that we just found in our figure 4 as we basically do a figure 4 or a tree pose here. So bending your right knee, it can go into the shin, it can go into the inner thigh of your left leg, perhaps a block on the outside of your right thigh feels good. Thumbs to the sky, arms out to the side, as we've done a few times. And then either frame your left foot or even take your hands onto a block here so that we can keep the length in our spine, the hinge in our hip. We have a happy hip moment here. You might walk out further, again, slumping to the ground and getting closer to your leg. Not what our goals are. Finding a place where there's the sweetness of sensation of a stretch in your right hip and probably in the back of your left leg. And then let's try to stretch the amount of time that we can be silent and still. Walk yourself in, help it along. Take your right thigh in your hand, stamp that right foot onto the ground, like the way we exited our standing stuff, and then extend your right leg out in front of you. A little waggle feels good sometimes. We'll set up our second side. So left foot could go into the shin, maybe it slides up into the inner thigh. If it's helpful, a block outside of your left thigh, and then thumbs to the sky, arms out to the side. We sit tall, and then either frame that right foot or take a block or a book and let it feel like you've got so much length in your spine. Curling those right toes back towards you. A steadiness, a breath. And then let's allow the stretch of stillness and silence to dance with the stretch in our left hip and right hamstring for a few moments here. Such great stillness and silence. Wander yourself back up. Let's help it along. Hold the outside of your left thigh. Extend that left leg out in front, maybe a little waggle. Make your way onto your back. So again, we tend to our props mindfully off to the side. We'll dismount whatever we're seated upon and move that off to the side too. And as you lie down on your back, one last hip-tastic moment. Right ankle on top of your left thigh, reclining pigeon, or basically our figure 4 that's now lying on the ground. It can stay just like this. You can reach through and hold on to the back of your left hamstring, or maybe even interlace around the front of your left shin. If it feels better to you, rest your head on a block or on that bolster pillow that you have. I'm turning to look at you, but you don't need to turn and look at me. Hopefully, with any luck, my instruction is clear enough that you can let your eyes close, let the back of your head be heavy on the ground or on your block. 2 moments here. Gently release. Feet hip distance, and we'll set up the second side. Left ankle, like our figure 4 that we did standing. Great to stay just like this. If you reach through the space, you have the option to hold behind the hamstring or to interlace around the front of your right shin. Although I'm looking at you, the back of your head is on the ground or on your cushion. And then just a few moments to steep in this side. And release this side slowly. Bring your feet as wide as your mat. Shimmy your shoulder blades underneath you. Let your knees fall in on one another, so a little knock-kneed. Maybe this feels best for our Shavasana final meditation. Or straighten one leg and then the other. Let your feet flop open. Close, maybe cover your eyes. Still the back of your head is heavy on the ground or maybe on your bolster or your block. This is our rest and digest. Shavasana. As always, I encourage you to stay here in your Shavasana final meditation as long as you'd like. If you're ready, wiggle your fingers and toes. You could stretch arms and legs away from each other. Collect your knees into your chest. Roll to either side. Come up to any comfortable seat, and you could sit on your bolster or on your folded blanket. palms up or down on your thighs. Just take a second before we crawl back out into our lives to really let this settle. To honor yourself for taking time to do this practice. I'm Andrea. Thank you so much for practicing with me today.